We are on Daf Kuf Tes Amid Aleph by the Mishnah. The Mishnah on Kuf Tes Amid Aleph. The subject of today's daf is figuring out what was Beis Chunyai. As we'll see later on in the daf, the story behind it. Beis Chunyai was basically a replica of the Beis Hamikdash that was made in Egypt by Chunya, the son of Shimon HaTzadik, who was the great Kohen Gadol. It's either Avodah Zarah or it was intended to be a replica of the Beis Hamikdash. It was for God, but it's still very usher to do a carbon over there because it's shchutei chutz. So it's definitely usher to bring a carbon in Beis Chunya. It's either avodah zara, or they meant it for God, but it's outside of the Beis Hamikdash. And it's a Peladic story of how Shimon Zatzadik's children created such a place. But we'll talk about that later on. So the Mishnah says like this. This entire Mishnah, from the first Mishnah to the next Mishnah, is very strange. Very, very challenging to figure out exactly, the Havana of the Davar. And then the next Mishnah is a lot easier. The Mishnah says like this: Harei alai oila. If a person says, "I'm going to bring an oila," perfect. So yakrivenu b'mikdash. You have to bring it in the Beis Hamikdash. Okay, it's pretty obvious. V'mikriva b'beis chunya lo yotza. And if you bring it in Beis Chunya, you're not yotza your obligation. Again, also pretty obvious considering Beis Chunya is not the Beis Hamikdash. Okay, Zok the Mishnah. This line is the Pella. This line is going to be the challenging line of the entire daf. Harei alai oila she'akrivenu bebeis chunya. If a person makes a neder and says, "I'm going to bring an oila in Beis Chunya," the halacha is yakrivenu b'mikdash. You still have to bring it in the Beis Hamikdash. Meaning, when you say the words Harei alai oila, that means that you're obligating yourself a carbon. Then, when you then said the words that I'm going to bring in a Beis Chunya, it's irrelevant because you're already mechayev a carbon. But im hikra of a Beis Chunya yatsa. If you brought the carbon in Beis Chunya, you're yotze your obligation. Now, this is a very challenging thing. A person says, "I'm going to bring a carbon in Beis Chunya," and you bring it in Beis Chunya, you're yotze obligation. Wait, yotze your obligation? It's a pella. It's chayiv kares. You're bringing a carbon outside of the Beis Hamikdash. How could you say you're yotze your obligation? That is going to be the challenge from one Mishnah to the next. That if I say I'm going to bring a carbon in Beis Chunya, and you bring it in Egypt, in Beis Chunya, you're yotze. How could you be yotze? What do you mean yotze? It's not a carbon. So I'm bringing a carbon. It's the equivalent of saying I'm going to bring a carbon in Empire State Building, and you bring it and say yotze. What do you mean yotze? It's a pella. Okay, we'll deal with that. Similar concept, but instead of a carbon by a nazir, harei alai nazir yigalech b'mikdash. If a person says I'm a nazir, he has to do the ceremony, the tahara process of the karbanos, whatever, by the Beis Hamikdash. Again, pretty obvious. V'im gilach bebeis chunya, and if you bring the karbanos in Beis Chunya, you're lo yotze. Again, also pretty obvious. But hareini nazir shegalech bebeis chunya. But if a person says I'm a nazir and I'm going to do the ceremony in Beis Chunya, so you have to yigalech b'mikdash. You have to do it in the Beis Hamikdash. But v'imgilach b'beis chunya yatsa. But if you did it in the Beis Chunya yatsa, again it's a pella. But both of these cases, I missed the line before. Rav Shimon Omer ein za oila and Rav Shimon Omer ein za nazir. Rav Shimon disagrees in both cases. Rav Shimon believes that saying you're going to do something in Beis Chunya is not a proper neder, and both of those it's nothing. Okay, so obviously the number one pella of the Mishnah is if a person says, "I'm going to bring an oila in Beis Chunya," and you bring it in Beis Chunya, you're yotze your obligation. How can you be yotze your obligation? Besides the fellas, look, first of all, you did a big aver because you bring a carbon outside the Beis Hamikdash. But let's put that aside. That's between you and God. The question is, are you yotze your obligation? So the Mishnah says yes. Here's the question: besides for the great sin that you did, how could you be yotze your obligation? When you shecht a carbon outside of the Beis Hamikdash, it's not a maisa shchita. It's the equivalent of just shooting the animal in the head because it's not a proper service. Shechting it outside of the Beis Hamikdash is not a maisa of a carbon. So how could I say that I'm yotze? It's the equivalent of me going over to a cow in middle of just shooting in the head. It's not a proper shchita in the process of a carbon. So how can I be yotze my obligation? It's a pella. It's a very, very strange thing. So says the Gemara, Yotza, I'm Yotze for bringing my carbon in Beis Chunya, HaMikdal Katla. You just killed it. That's all you did. You took a carbon, and instead of bringing it to the Beis Hamikdash and actually brought it as a carbon, you just shot it on Main Street. How could you be Yotze with this? Appella. So says the Gemara, answer number one is Amrav Hamnuna, Nasa Koimer Harelai Oila Amenashalei Eschai Bachrais. You know what the answer is? It's the equivalent of saying like this. I'm going to bring an oila on condition that if it gets hit by a car, anything happens to it, I'm free. Meaning, in other words, you can make a stipulation that I'm going to bring an oila, but if anything happens to this animal, I'm not held responsible. In such a situation, if you shoot it on Main Street, you're not responsible. So in other words, what Rav is saying is, or Rav Hamnuna is saying is, it really is a carbon. When you say Hareya alai oila shakrivena beis chunyoy, what you're in essence saying is, this is an actual oila. But if I want to shoot it anywhere, I'm not responsible. I'm not yotzim my obligation not as if I brought a carbon, but it means I'm not responsible. So in other words, according to Rav Hamnuna, it is a carbon. And if you bring it in the Beis Hamikdash, great. If you bring it in Beis Chunyai or shoot it on Main Street, you're not responsible to replace it. But you know what you would be? You'd be chayiv kares for bringing a carbon outside of the Beis Hamikdash, meaning it is a full-fledged carbon. What do you mean if it's a full-fledged carbon? You said you're going to bring it Beis Chunyai. What you meant is, this is a carbon on condition that if anything happens to it, I'm not responsible. So when you shecht in Beis Chunya, you just brought a carbon outside of the Beis Hamikdash. You did a very big sin, but you're not responsible to replace it because that was the stipulation you made. I'm not responsible to replace it. So when the Mishnah says yotza, it doesn't mean yotza as in you fulfilled your obligation. It just means.
So he's saying he has in mind to bring a carbon in the Beis Hamikdash.
Correct, according to Rav Hamnuna. You really mean I'm going to bring the Beis Hamikdash, but you're saying if anything happens to it, I'm out. So okay, so something happened to it. So you be chayiv kares. Huh? What? Okay, but that's Rav Hamnuna's. Listen, it's a challenging thing. That's Rav Hamnuna's mahalach. The problem is, let me just say outside the problem. The problem is, if you're going to say that that's what the Mishnah means, it's an actual carbon, but I'm not responsible. Keep going. What's the next case in the Mishnah? I'm a nazir on condition that I bring the karbanos in Beis Chunyai. If you brought them in Beis Chunyai, you're yotza. What do you mean you're yotza? You're still a nazir. If you're telling me that it's at a full-fledged oila, and you're just saying I'm not responsible, that means by a nazir, I'm a nazir on condition that I bring the karbanos in Beis Chunyai. That means, according to you, I'm a nazir on condition that what? That I can just end it whenever I want? But how are you yotze? How did you end it? Unless you bring the proper karbanos, you're a nazir forever. Meaning by a carbon, when you say I'm not responsible, it means that if this animal gets hit by a bus, I'm out. But by a nazir, when you're a nazir, if you're telling me that you're a full-fledged oila, that means you're a full-fledged nazir. Because you have the right kavana. That means that I'm a nazir that what? And I'm done when? When you bring the proper carbon. So how could the Mishnah say by a nazir that if you bring it in Beis Chunya, you're yotza? What do you mean yotza? Yotza implies that you're done. You're not done. You didn't bring the carbon. And if you didn't bring the carbon, by an oila, you could say that this animal is an oila, but if something happens to it, I'm not responsible. Fine, that animal gets hit by a bus, you go away. But by a nazir, when you're a nazir, if you're a full-fledged nazir, if you're telling me you're a nazir, you're only free from that nazirus when you bring the proper carbon. So how could you say that if I bring it to Beis Chunya, you're yotza? What do you mean yotza? You didn't bring a proper carbon.
But with the first case, if the animal got hit by a bus,
Yeah.
still
No, that's the point. This is an oila, I'm not responsible. That's the point. But that doesn't apply by a nazir. Because by a nazir, once you're a nazir, you're not free of the nazirus until those karbanos release you. So how could you say if you bring a Beis Chunya, you're yotza? What do you mean yotza? You're not free yet. If you're taka telling me that it's a real nazirus and it's a real carbon, then how? I'm not free. Says the Gemara, Amrli Rava, Elameata, keep reading the Mishnah. Say v'dan erin in nazir shakelach Beis Chunya, yigilach b'mikdash, yigilach Beis Chunya yotza. I mean yotza. Hachanami dinasa omer nazir amnashal is chay b'achrayis karbanasel. But it doesn't work. Nazir kamad olay maisi karbanas of le miskasher. So you know what Rava says? Rava says to Rav Hamnuna, you misunderstood the entire Mishnah. It's not a real carbon, and you're not a real nazir. When you said the words, I'm a nazir, I'm bringing a carbon in Beis Chunya, all you're saying is, this is what you're saying, I'm going to give a gift to God. Not an actual carbon. I don't even know why you're doing this. I don't know what it means, but you're just saying to Hashem, I'm going to give you a gift of an animal, and I'm going to bring it all the way to Beis Chunya. That's it. Your yotza, meaning that your neder is removed, because you fulfilled your neder. It's not a carbon. If you shechted in Beis Chunya, you're not chayiv kares. It's not a carbon. And when you say you're a nazir, you're not really a nazir. You're just saying to Hashem, I'm not going to cut my hair. I'm making a neder. I'm not going to cut my hair until I go to Beis Chunya. It's not real. It's not a real carbon, and it's not a real nazirus. Now, by the way, if you bring the carbon in the Beis Hamikdash, then it's retroactively revealed that it was a carbon. But if you go to Beis Chunya, that means that it's not a carbon. It's not an actual carbon, according to Rava. The whole thing is fake. All you're saying to Hashem is, Hashem, I'm going to gift you an animal. What type of gift is that? I don't know. I don't really know what it means because Hashem never asked for that. And it's not a carbon. And if you could bring it in Beis Chunya, you're yotze, meaning that you fulfilled your neder. I could also make a neder. I'm going to drink soda every day. It doesn't mean anything. It's not a carbon, and the nazirus are not a real nazirus. That's Rava's approach. Again, says the Gemara, Lama Rava, Adam zeladara nischaven. It's not a carbon. This person just intended to give a gift to God. And all he was saying is, Amar isagi bebeis chunya tarachna, I'm willing to travel to Beis Chunya. Tvei loy metzin story. I'm not going to go further. But it's not a carbon. And by the way, when you bring it in Beis Chunya, you're not chayiv for shchutei chutz. It's not a carbon. Nazir nami, so to buy a nazir, high gavra l'tzur nashke mechaben. It's not a nazir. You just want to pain yourself for whatever reason. You're just telling Hashem, I'm not going to cut my hair. Okay, great. Until your neder is removed, and the neder is by going to Beis Chunya. It's not a nazirus. And the Gemara says, so according to Rav Hamnuna, it's a nazir and it's a real oila. According to Rava, the whole thing's fake. So says the Gemara, let's put it together. Rav Hamnuna Amar Lach, nazir kedika amrit, but oila manashle is chai b'acharayis kama. Rav Hamnuna responds to Rava, I like your thinking, but I'm going to take part of it. By the oila, I think it's a real carbon. On condition you're not responsible. By the nazir, it's fake. So Rav Hamnuna says to Rava, I'll take your shot by the nazir, but the oil I'm going to keep. Oil, I think it's a real carbon, and you're just saying I'm not responsible if it gets hit by a bus. So if you bring in a Beis Chunya, you're going to be chayiv a kares for bringing a carbon outside of Beis Hamikdash, but you're not responsible. But by a nazir, I think it's fake taka. So says the Gemara, let's put it together. Rav Yechanan also feels this way. If a person says, I'm bringing an oila on condition, I bring a Beis Chunya, which again, according to Rav Hamnuna, means it's a real carbon. Hekriva be'eretz Yisrael, yotzav anash kares. If you bring it outside of the Beis Hamikdash, you chayiv kares. Why? Because it's a real carbon. It's just you're saying I'm not responsible. Tanya Mihachi, the Brisa similarly states, Harei alai oila shakivenu b'midbar. If a person says, I have an oila on condition I bring in the midbar, v'ekriva be'ever yarden, and you bring it outside of Israel, yotzav anash kares. Because again, it's a real carbon. You're just saying I'm not responsible. Okay, new topic. And this is going to be the discussion of Beis Chunya, the palace itself. What was its status? Was it a replica of the Beis Hamikdash for God, or was it purely Avodah Zarah?
You said it was in Mitzrayim, right?
Egypt, yeah.
So, I mean, obviously the bigger issue is Shchutei Chutz, but isn't it an issue bringing it to Egypt in the first place?
Well, you're not supposed to live in Egypt, but people travel. I mean, there were Jews historically lived. The Rambam lived in Egypt. There were situations where Jews lived in Egypt. You're not supposed to go back to Egypt, but you're right. It's a much smaller problem than bring a carbon or potentially idolatry. Which he did. He did go from Egypt. But again, I think going to Egypt, as we'll see in the story, was the least of this guy's worries. He had major problems. So the Gemara says, the Mishnah says like this: any kohen that served in this Beis Chunya palace, lo yishamshu b'mikdash b'Yerushalayim. He's no longer allowed to serve in the Beis Hamikdash. And as we're going to see, this Mishnah believes it's not Avodah Zarah, because if it's Avodah Zarah, you definitely cannot do in the Beis Hamikdash. Once you do an idolatry, by the way, as we're going to see, once a kohen does idolatry, he's out. Even if he does tshuva, he's out. He can never serve in the Beis Hamikdash again. Our Mishnah saying is that Chazal extended this penalty to Beis Chunya. Even though Beis Chunya was not Avodah Zarah, Chazal did not like the Kehanim that served because it's definitely Asr, and therefore if you served in Beis Chunya, you're out. Even if you did Tshuva, you're out. And then the Mishnah says, Ein tzarich loimer davar acher, and kal v'choimer if you did idolatry. So it's clear from the Mishnah, Beis Chunya is not idolatry. If you served in Beis Chunya, it's also kal v'choimer if you did idolatry, because Beis Chunya is not idolatry. Now the Mishnah then continues. Shenemar, what's the source that if you serve in Beis Chunya, you're out? Ach layalu kehane habomes el mizbach Hashem b'Yerushalayim. Any kohen that serves on a private altar, meaning for God, but outside of the Beis Hamikdash, lo yalu Yerushalayim. You cannot serve in Yerushalayim. Ki im achlu matzos b'teichachem. All they could do is eat. Meaning, what the pasuk is saying is that these kehanim who served in Beis Chunya, as a penalty, they're still allowed to eat the karbanos, but they can't serve in the Beis Hamikdash. Zak the Mishnah, harei lekebali mumin. These kehanim have the status of a kohen who has a mum. What's the status of a kohen who has a mum? He's allowed to eat a share in the karbanos, but he can't serve. Cholkin va'olchin v'loy makriven. Okay, good. Now, what we're going to have a discussion until we talk about the story of Beis Chunya in a few moments is the discussion is going to be which type of service to idolatry makes you forever penalized. As we're going to see, once you do idolatry, even if you do tshuva, you're out. The question is, what if you shechted for idolatry, which is not considered a real service? You understand, meaning what did you do for idolatry? Shogeg, Mazid, all of these discussions. Rav Yehuda says, Kohen sheshachat l'avodah zara. If a kohen does shchita for avodah zara, karban ereach nichayach. If he does tshuva, his karbanos will be accepted for God. Meaning, shchita for avodah zara is not an automatic penalty. You're not automatically disqualified. You could do tshuva from that. As we're going to see, shchita is not considered serving idolatry. Serving idolatry is the services of zrika, of whatever that service was. For Markulis, it's throwing the rocks. Shchita is considered more of a prerequisite to the service. It's not considered the actual service. The actual service was like burning the animal, all that stuff. So if you do that, you're out. But if you shecht, you could do tshuva. You still have a chance.
Meaning what? Meaning that you can go ahead and shecht afterwards?
No. If you shecht it for idolatry and then you do tshuva, you could serve in the Beis Hamikdash.
Which means, okay.
You could do anything in the Beis Hamikdash. As long as you do tshuva, if you shecht it, it's not a lifetime ban. It's not a Pete Rose lifetime ban. You understand? The Gemara says, Rav Yitzchak bar Rav Dimi, Mikra, what's the source that even if you did shchita, you're still in, and the lifetime ban is only by a service of idolatry, which is like zrika, burning a korban, all those type of things. Because the pasuk says in Yechezkel, Yan asher yesharsu oisam lefanai gliluhem v'oylu beis Yisrael lemichshol v'avoin. The pasuk says, because Yesharsu, they served, not shchita, they served idolatry, and they were a stumbling and a sin for the house of Israel. Therefore I raise my hand against them, says Hashem, and they shall always have their sin. And the pasuk then says, they cannot come near me. Meaning, if you did a sherus, if you did a service for idolatry, you're out. Lifetime ban. So says the Gemara, shiris in shchita lav shiris. So the pasuk specifically says a shirus. A shirus means a service. Shchita is not a shirus. Shchita is not a service. Itmar. Now here's the question, though. Okay, so let's talk this out. Shchita, no lifetime ban. Service of idolatry, lifetime ban. But here's the shaila. Let's do a service of idolatry. An example is zrika. You did zrika sadam for idolatry, lifetime ban. Here's the question, though. What if I did Zrika b'shoigig? You did Zrika b'mezid, lifetime ban, no question, Shaila. What if I did Zrika b'shoigig? I'm a kohen who thought it was allowed. I thought it was allowed. My bad. I didn't know that you can't do Zrika for idolatry. Is there a lifetime ban on a shoigig? So it's a machlekes. Itmar shogag b'zrika. If a kohen did avodah zara b'shoigig, Rav Nachman Omar karban ereach nichayach. Rav Nachman says you could do tshuva. Rav Sheshes Amar ein karban ereach nichayach. Rav Sheshes says you cannot do tshuva. So it doesn't matter. You're out. By the way, we have such a concept. Taisus talks about this. We don't have a service in the Beis Hamikdash anymore, but we have birchas koyanim. If a kohen, by the way, according to Svardim, if a kohen kills somebody, there's no tshuva. You can't do tshuva for that. Even b'shoigig, you can't do tshuva according to Svardim. Ashkenazim, well, you could, but according to Svardim, if a kohen kills somebody, tshuva can't help.
Like a car accident.
No, a car accident might be onus. It's drinking and driving, maybe. Because a car accident might be an onus. The guy jumped in front of the car. Ravadi talks about this. I'm talking shoigig.
But not the army.
No, that's a mitzvah. But the point is, so if you did it b'shoigig, avodah zara b'shoigig is machlokes. This is what we're going to talk about to the end. Again, shchita, no lifetime ban. Shoigig by avodah zara, machlokes. Well, we're going to talk about one more point. The only thing we have not addressed is what if you did shchita b'mezid? We said shchita, there's no lifetime ban, but what if I did shchita b'mezid? It could be shchita b'mezid. You did it on purpose. That might be a lifetime ban. We're going to see in a moment. Rav Sheshes, who says there's a lifetime ban for accidental avodah zara. What's the source? D'chsiv v'hayu lebeis Yisrael lemichshol avon. The pasuk has two lashonos, michshol and avon. What's michshol and what's avon? Michshol is accidental, avon is on purpose. So you see the pasuk specifically says, even a michshol, which is accidental, you're out. My lav, oy michshol oy avon, michshol shoigig avon mezid. So you see that you're out by michshol or avon. Accidental or on purpose, lifetime ban. Rav Nachman, who says there's no lifetime ban for accidental avodah zara, what does he do with michshol avon? He says it's not two types. It's michshol shel avon, meaning the sin of on purpose, not accidental and on purpose. It's not two separate categories, no comma. It's a description. Michshol shel avon, meaning the punishment of the on purpose sin. Rav Nachman, who believes there's no lifetime ban for accidental avodah zara, what's the source? So Rav Nachman says like this. Titania b'chipar ha'koyin al nefesh hashegas b'chato b'shkaga. The pasuk says that there is forgiveness for a b'shkaga. Shoygig means accident, yeah? And there's forgiveness. Melamed shekoyin miskabri de'atzmai. B'mai. Now, which avodah zara avera did you do? The pasuk says there's forgiveness for accidental. Now, what did you do? If you did shchita, then it's pashit. The Gemara says, if it's shchita, aren't you forgiven for shchita even if you did it on purpose? It's not a service. So why does the pasuk say shoygig? It must be the pasuk is referring to a service of avodah zarah, a zrika, and it's saying shoygig, you're still forgiven. Because again, what's the options? According to Rabbi Nachman, if you do shoygig, you're forgiven. Why? Because the pasuk says you're forgiven for shoygig. Now, what is the pasuk talking about? If it's talking about shchita for avodah zarah, I thought shchita you're forgiven even b'mezid. It must be zrika. And saying, shoygig, you're forgiven. How does Rav Sheshes respond? You know what Rav Sheshes says? Because Rav Sheshes says, shoygig, you're for a lifetime ban. The pasuk says there's a forgiveness. Rav Sheshes responds, it's talking about shchita. And even shchita, there's no lifetime ban, only if it's b'shoygig. If it's b'mezid, you're out. So according to Rav Sheshes, mezid shchita, you're out. Shoygig avodah zarah, you're out. Rav Sheshes says if you did it on purpose by shchita, you're also out. You're a mishares. So according to Rav Sheshes, so by the way, turns out, the machlekes of Nachman Rav Sheshes is now twofold. If you did shoygeg of avodah zarah, are you lifetime ban? And if you do memezid b'shchita for avodah zarah, is there a lifetime ban? The Gemara says, the truth is this machlekes, they repeated themselves. The itmar hazed b'shchita, if a kohen does shchita for avodah zarah on purpose. Rav Nachman Amar Karban Reich Nichayach. Rav Nachman said there's no lifetime ban. Rav Sheshes Amar Ein Karban Reich Nichayach. Rav Sheshes says there is a lifetime ban. Rav Nachman Amar Karban Reich Nichayach. Rav Nachman says there's no lifetime ban for purposeful shchita for avodah zarah to liyavet sheiris, because that's not considered a service. Shchita is not considered a service of avodah zarah. So why would we lifetime ban you? Rav Sheshes Amar Ein Karban Reich Nichayach. Go to the next page. Rav Sheshes says no, there is a lifetime ban. Why? Nasa misharis avodah zarah, because he believes that purposeful shchita is considered a service of avodah zarah. Okay. Amr of Nachman, how do I know that if you do shchita b'mezid, lifetime ban, Tanya, koyin she'avar avodas kechavim b'shav. If a koyin does avodah zarah, v'shav. Now v'shav means you do tshuva. V'shav is not a terminology you would give for shoygig. Shoygig is not, you don't have to, shav means that I'm doing something wrong, I recognize my ways and I go back. If it's shoygig, I didn't even realize. So the pasuk says v'shav. So the Brisa says that he did avodah zarah v'shav, and you did tshuva, which means mezid, and he did tshuva, you're forgiven. Wait a minute, I thought mezid, you're a lifetime ban. The answer is, it must be referring to shchita, and you see that even shchita b'mezid, there's no lifetime ban. The Gemara says, b'mai, ilem b'shoygig my b'shav, shav oimenu, el pshita b'mezid, v'shav implies mezid. And it's saying that there's forgiveness. Now, there can't be forgiveness for mezid avodah zarah, you're out. It must be mezid shchita. So how does Rav Sheshes respond? Because Rav Sheshes feels that if it's b'mezid, there's a lifetime ban in all situations. It says v'shav. He says v'shav actually means b'shoygig. What do you mean v'shav? V'shav means if it was always shoygig. Meaning v'shav implies generally b'mezid, because v'shav, you wouldn't describe v'shav by shoygig, but he's saying you have to tighten it up, it means b'shoygig as well. Rav Sheshes amar lach la'olam b'shoygig, v'hochik amar, im shav me'ikaroi d'chiyave b'shoygig, ave karban reich nichayich, v'lav ein karban reich. What it means v'shav, it doesn't mean you did tshuva, it means if it was always shoygig, then there's forgiveness. Okay, so you have a machlokes, Rav Nachman, Rav Sheshes, is there tshuva possibility on mezid shchita? The Gemara says they argue by two other situations.
So Rav Nachman says that there is?
Yeah.
And Rav Yeshua says?
Rav Sheshes says no. So the Gemara says another machlokes. Hishtachal v'avodah zarah. If a kohen bows down to an idol, bowing down is not classically a service. It shows affection though. So Rav Nachman Amar Karban Reich Nichayach. Rav Nachman consistent. You could do tshuva. Rav Sheshes Amar Ein Karban Reich Nichayach, lifetime ban. So they argue the same thing by bowing down. And the final machlokes is hoidel avodah zarah. Hoidel avodah zarah means you don't even do anything. You just say to an idol, "You are my God." Chas v'shalom. If a person says those words to an idol, he basically accepts that idol as his God. So it's a weiter machlokes. Rav Nachman Amar Karban Reich Nichayach, Rav Sheshes Amar Ein Karban Reich Nichayach. Same machlokes. So the question is, why do they have to argue in all three situations? They argue by purposeful shchita, they argue by bowing down, and they argue by acceptance. So the Gemara is going to explain because each one's a bigger chiddush. I'll tell you why. Purposeful shchita, at least you did a ma'aser shchita. Bowing down, you didn't even do anything for the idol. You physically did something, but it's not like you changed an item. It's not like you slaughtered an animal. And then acceptance, you didn't even do any act. You didn't even bow down. You just used mere words. So it's a chiddush. It's moving up. Tzricha, you need all three. If I only had the machlokes by the shchita, but he come Rav Sheshes, I would say only there does Rav Sheshes have a lifetime membership to Avid L'Sheris, because that is a service. Aval shchita delay Avid L'Sheris imad L'Rachman. I'm sorry. The first machlokes b'shoigig, right? They argue by four things. They argue by hoida, shchita, hishtachavua, and the first one was zrika b'shoigig. So if you only had zrika b'shoigig, I would say over there that was a service. But shchita, even though b'mezid, maybe everyone agrees it's okay to do tshuva. V'yashmin and shchita, and if you just had shchita, mishum da'avle avoda, because at least that's an avoda. At least it's something that was done in the Beis Hamikdash. But aval shtachavua delayavle avoda, but bowing down, which is not considered even avoda bechalal, emaloi tzricha the yashmin hachishtachavua. And if you just have the case of a shtachavua, mishum da'avle ma'isa, at least over there there's an act by bowing down. Aval hoida, but mere acceptance of the idol, to dibura ba'alma emaloi tzricha. Okay, so now the Gemara is going to be discussing the story behind Beis Chunyai, the history of it. I will say this: one of the biggest pellas, one of the strangest things, is that the story that happened, whatever the story is, there's going to be two different versions of what happened. It's not flattering either way, because it either ends with a house of avodah zarah or a house of serving God outside of the Beis Hamikdash. Both are really, really bad. But what's shocking more is these are the two sons of Shimon HaTzadik, the great Kohen Gadol for, I think, is 80 years in the second Beis Hamikdash, and both of it, there was a level of ignorance by his sons that are shocking. It's a peladik gazach. Shimon HaTzadik's sons, besides for going off the derech, there was a level of ignorance, as we're going to see in a moment, they didn't even know what to wear. It's a strange, crazy story.
What's also even more, remember Shimon HaTzadik dies 2 centuries before the destruction of the second Beis Hamikdash.
No. This is
going on.
This is during the good times. This is the good times of the second Beis Hamikdash. Meaning, sometimes you read the second Beis Hamikdash, you're like, at the end it was just chaos. This is Shimon HaTzadik. Well, we'll see. The Gemara says, the fact that the Mishnah says that if you served in Beis Chunya, you're out, and kal v'chomer if you did avodah zarah, implies the Beis Chunya lav avodah zarah. That our Mishnah follows the view that this temple, Beis Chunya, that was the house of Chunya, was not in a house of avodah zarah. It was meant for God. Now it was aser because it was outside of the Beis Hamikdash, but it was not idolatry. This, in truth, is a machlokes tanoim. Tanya Kamanda Omar Beis Chunya lav avodah zarah. Our Mishnah follows the view of Rav Yehuda that it was not considered avodah zarah. The Tanya. This is the story. The story goes as follows: the year that Shimon HaTzadik was prepared to die, Omer lehen shana zuhu meis. Shimon HaTzadik left the Kodesh HaKadoshim on Yom Kippur, and he told his family and friends that I'm going to die this year. Amr Lai, they said to him, hey, how do you know that you're not going to live the year? So Amr Lehen, Kol Yom Kippurim, because it says every Yom Kippur, when I leave the Kodesh HaKadoshim, when I enter the Kodesh HaKadoshim, Nizam li zaken echad, I see the image of an older man, Lavush Levanim, that he's wearing white clothes, V'nisatav Levanim, and he looks white and he's wrapped in white clothing, a symbol of the Shechina. And he escorts me in and he escorts me out. That was sort of a small level nevuah or ruach hakodesh that I'm going to survive. But shana zu, but this year nizdam li zaken echad lavush shchayrim, I saw that same man wearing black clothes, sign of mourning. V'nisat shchayrim, v'nichnas imi v'leyatz imi, and he escorted me in, but he did not escort me out, meaning implying that this year I'm not going to be escorted out of the year. He's not going to survive the year. La'achar regel, after Sukkot that year. It was about 2 weeks later, a week later, Shchala Shivas Yamim Umeis. He was sick for 7 days and then he died. And afterwards there was such mourning that they didn't want to say the Shem Hashem. Meaning from that point on, the Kehanim did not say it with the proper holiness. Meaning there was a tremendous Yerida after Shimon HaTzadik. Fine. Now here's the story about Shimon HaTzadik's kids.
It was the last thing you actually considered Noah. So by definition, it's going to be a big reason.
Now, Shimon HaTzadik had 2 sons. his oldest son, Shimi. Interesting. Shimon and Shimi, not the same. Shimi was his oldest son, and then he had Chunyai, who was 2.5 years younger. Now you'd assume that the one that would take over for him would be Shimi, the oldest son. But he said this version, this is Rav Meir's version of the story. B'shas pitirasai amar lehem. At the moment when he was about to die, he said, Chunya b'ni yishamish tachtoi. I want my younger son to take over. Now that was a little bit shocking because normally you go the oldest son, but he said, I want Chunya to take over. Now, Niskana by Shimi Yachav. According to this version, Shimi, the older brother, is jealous of his younger brother. Either way, this is not going to end. By the way, this is very it's a bad reflection of the kids. Either way, Shimi, the older one, is jealous that the younger son is taking over. So this is what he did. Let me say outside. Let me say it outside, then we'll see it inside. He basically, the older son set up the younger brother for failure. Here's what he did. The younger son did not even know what the Kohen Gadol would wear, which is a pella, because it's in the Torah. But he told his younger son, his younger brother, here's what you wear. He told him to wear his wife's clothing, like a woman's dress, and like a woman's satchel. So he says, okay, because it's his older brother. He wears the women's clothing and goes into the Beis HaMikdash. The older brother goes over to the other Kahanim and say, look what he's doing over here. He must have told his wife that the day he takes over, he's going to show how much he loves his wife. He's going to wear her clothing. He's not taking this seriously. They try to kill Chunya, and Chunya ran away. That's the story of how Chunya left the Beis HaMikdash, because he was set up by his brother, and he had to run for his life. Because the other Kahanim wanted to kill him. That's, by the way, Pella. The sons of Shimon HaTzadik. Either way, you have the older brother trying to kill the younger brother, and the younger brother, not even knowing what a Kohen Gadol should wear, he's wearing women's clothing. He's cross-dressing in the Beis HaMikdash. It's a Pella Gadol. Says the Gemara, so Amar Loi, the older brother said to the younger brother, here, let me teach you how to do the Kohen Gadol stuff. He dressed him in a leather blouse and with a nice sash, like his wife's belt. And he stood him next to the Mizbeach. At that point, the older brother sets him up. So Shimi, the older brother, goes to the Kahanim and says, look what he said to his wife. He swore to her, he must have sworn, he said, that the day that I take over, I'm going to wear your clothing to show how much I love you. So, that's not good. So, Big Shach of Kahanim Lahargai. So the other Kahanim try to kill him. Rotz b'fneim, Chunya is now chased. V'rotzu achrav, they run after him. Holoch l'Alexandria shel Mitzrayim, and he ran to Egypt. Ubana sham mizbeach, and he built a mizbeach there. V'hela sham l'sham avodah zara, and he did as avodah zara, because according to this version, he was sort of running from his life. He kind of went off the derech, and he did avodah zara. Now, by the way, the Gemara says the message from this story is when the Chum heard this version of the story, they said, if the older brother was so jealous of the younger brother taking his position, and the older brother didn't even have the position, when you have the position, how hard it would be for someone else to take it. And the older brother didn't even have the position, and he was that jealous and insanely by losing the position. Mm-hmm. So the Gemara says, you see from here, when you actually have the position, taking it away from someone is not so pashut. Meaning, in other words, when you have like a rabbi in a yeshiva, firing him and replacing him is not a small thing, because you see how much it messed with Shimi's brain, just losing the position he didn't even have, but he thought he would have it. So the Gemara says, you see from here that they would not fire Kehanim Gedolim very quickly, because it's not so pashut to take a job away from somebody. That's the point. When someone has a job, not so pashut to take it away. Fine. But that's the first version of the story, that Shimi set up Chunya. Because Chunya was given the position, Chunya ran and did Avodah Zarah. That's Rav Meir's version of the story. And we'll end with Rav Yehuda's version of the story. Rav Yehuda says, no, Amalei Rav Yehuda, loy kacha yemaisa. No. Eloi kibel of Chunya. I'll tell you outside the story. The story, according to Rav Yehuda, is as follows. Shimon HaTzadik is dying, and he says Chunya should take it over. But according to this version of the story, Chunya refused to take over. He said, it's not right that my brother should do it. My brother should do it. He's older than me. Let my brother do it. Very kind. Brother actually takes the job. Chunya, according to this version, has remorse that he actually was kind. And he's like, no, that was a mistake. I want it. He set up Shimi. He went over to Shimi, the older brother, and said, let me teach you what to wear. Dressed up Shimi in his wife's clothing. Set up Shimi. When Shimi gets caught on this, and they say, why are you wearing women's clothing? He's like, well, Chunya told me to. They all turn on Chunya, and he runs to Alexandria.
Why would the older brother
Not know?
That's what we're talking.
What do you mean? Well, either way, both is ignorance either way. But according to this version, Chunya actually gave the position to Shimi and had remorse, set Shimi up. He turned back on Chunya and he ran. But according to this version, as we'll see, it wasn't Avodah Zarah. He legitimately did service of Hashem outside of the Beis Hamikdash. Also very Yasser, but not Avodah Zarah. Let's just see it inside. The Gemara says, "Loi kach ha'maisa, and loi kibul of Chunya." Chunya refused to actually take it over. Because his older brother was 2.5 years older than him. But he had remorse and he wanted the position back. So what did he do? Amar Loi, he told his older brother, let me teach you how to be a Kohen Gadol. The Hilbi Shabon Klev Hagav Tziltzol, again, where's the women clothing? The Amida Tzil Mizbeach, Amar Lemelacha V'Kehan Ruman, others of a kind Loyavoy. Chunya says to the Kehanim, look at my older brother, he must have told his wife that he's going to wear women's clothing. Now, the other Kehanim turn to Shimi and try to kill Shimi, but Shimi then says, Sachlim Komor. Shimi's like, whoa, I was told to wear this by my younger brother Chunya. Turns back on Chunya. Bikshel harges Chunya. Rotz b'pnei v'ratzu achreim. They start chasing Chunya. Rotz l'beis hamelech v'ratzu achrav. Kol roi oisam zehu zeh. And everywhere he's running, they're all saying, "Oh, that's Chunya, that's Chunya," and they're all chasing after Chunya. Just one second. They're all chasing after Chunya. And Halach Alexander Shom Mitzrayim. He goes to Egypt. Bonasham Mizbeach, builds a Mizbeach. Helav l'shem Shemayim. And according to this version of the story, Rabbi Yehuda's version, it's not Avodah Zarah. It's l'shem Shemayim. And it's a fulfillment of the prophecy, not a prophecy we want to fulfill, but a fulfillment of the nevuah of Yeshaya that says that there will be a day where the mizbeach will be built in Egypt. And we'll end with this: the Gemara says the message according to this story is that the whole story is that basically Chunya originally was humble and he said, "Let my brother take it," and still the covet got after him and he turned. Kavachomer, if someone runs after covet at the beginning, meaning if Chunya, who initially ran away from covet, he still lost his mind. Kavachomer for someone who runs after covet initially, how devastating covet could be. All right, we'll stop here. We'll pick it up tomorrow.